On Law Weekly today, we discuss the call for a state of emergency and the Quarantine Act. We have the views of a senior legal practitioner, GT Ogunye. Also showing on the program, there's been an increase in the reporting of domestic violence. The coordinator of the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Response Team, Lola Vivo Adeniyi, says though the courts are shut, victims can still access justice. She gives us the figures and tips for staying safe. And how can lawyers stay relevant and help their communities during the lockdown? We talked to the chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association, Ikorodu branch, Bayo Akilade. That's the lineup on this episode of the program. Hello and welcome. I'm Shola Sheyeli. Following the president's broadcast ordering a lockdown on Lagos, Ogun, and the FCT with a view to curb the spread of the coronavirus, some legal practitioners immediately faltered the move. They argued that having failed to invoke his constitutional powers to declare a state of emergency, which must be approved by the National Assembly, the president lacks the powers to restrict movement. The presidency has since gone on to make regulations subject to an old colonial legislation, the Quarantine Act of 1926. Now, a senior legal practitioner, GT Ogunye, believes this route is more applicable to the current public health situation rather than invoking the constitutional provision of declaring a state of emergency.
Let's just say that the world is under siege of this terrible pandemic. And it's a very serious matter. And I think that we should take it seriously. Thankfully, in Nigeria, we've not recorded casualties in the way and manner other countries have. But the truth of the matter is that Nigerians in the diaspora are also dying. At the last count, I think that about 6 Nigerians have died in the diaspora. And these are human beings too. So when Nigerians at home celebrate that they are only recording few casualties, they should also think about those Nigerians who are outside and indeed the rest of humanity. Now, it is good to proceed lawfully, legally. A democratic society is a society governed by the rule of law. A constitutional democracy is a democracy that is anchored on the Constitution, which is the ground norm. And of course, there are other laws. So every act of the government must derive from the law, whether the ground norm or other laws. So it is accepted that when the president or a governor or any agency is going to act in respect of this pandemic, that authority must act in accordance with the law. And of course, the argument is out there that the president ought to have declared a state of emergency. First, a mere declaration of a state of emergency, even the president had declared one, will not solve the problems posed by the pandemic. A state of emergency was declared by President Goodluck Jonathan in the Northeast. That didn't stop Boko Haram. So a declaration of a state of emergency is not the magic wand that will put an end to this pandemic. Government has to show responsibility in a way the citizenry also has to show responsibility. And that's the number one point. Number 2 point is that while some of our colleagues were fixated on the declaration of a state of emergency under Section 305 of the Constitution, believing that it's only when that declaration is made, or that proclamation is made, validated by a resolution of the National Assembly, that certain rights and civil liberties can be curtailed under a constitutional democracy. And my argument is that it is not true. There is an archaic law, an old colonial law, that we now know is called the Quarantine Act, made in 1926, amended in 1929, and further amended in 1954, which allows the president of the country to make regulations regarding infectious diseases, including now either Lassa fever, Ebola, or now coronavirus. And that law is there. Unfortunately, not many of our colleagues appreciated that that law was just tucked in there in our statutes. And so they were talking about a declaration of a state of emergency. And my argument was that the president could make regulations under that law governing the restriction or the measures that the government may wish to take. And happily, eventually, after the broadcast of the president, I think that the president eventually made those regulations late into the night before the commencement of the lockdown in Lagos. That of Ogun State was postponed, and then the lockdown in Abuja. Now, let me say generally that in dealing with this pandemic, authorities in Nigeria, not just the president, governors, and other authorities, have taken responsibility. The NJC, for example, with the Chief Justice of Nigeria, took a step by, regulating appearances in court and sittings of judges in court. If you look at the Constitution, and I'm referencing Section 153 that established the National Judicial Council, and Part 1 of the third schedule, Paragraph 20, establishing the NJC, and Paragraph 21, prescribing the powers. Strictly speaking, the NJC or the CJN does not have the power to suspend sittings of courts across the country.
It's not expressly stated.
It's not stated there. But that's what the NJC did. It's not stated there, right? Because every court has its own law. So if you look at it that way, you may then question the validity of the NJC directive. But no lawyer is questioning it because it was done in the best interest of our public health. We can't just say we don't need the rule of law. We don't need regulation. The president can act anyhow. That is too extreme. So my view is that while that is extreme, it can also be extreme for some of us to be insisting that unless and until a state of emergency is declared under Section 305, then the president cannot proceed. That's my view. And now, which is also a very interesting matter. Before now, Nigerians had, ahead of the leadership, been prescriptive. Oh, restrict flights. Oh, place a total ban on it. Oh, everybody that's coming to the country, quarantine them for at least 14 days before any one of them who is clean can come, into the larger society. Nigeria, the social media was agog. There was cacophony of voices and so on and so forth.
But despite the agitation on social media, some of these people are the ones defying the lockdown order.
Many people are saying that we're hungry. Of course, we're hungry people. And so we're bound to be hungry. But that doesn't mean that we are not rational people. Okay? And so it is not right for our people to just say, no, this is far away. It's not going to happen. 500, 1,000 people dying in one day in the United States is no joke. Over 500 dying one day in UK is no joke. The myth that this place is hot, we are black people, we are strong, or we are resilient, in any case, we've been suffering, so we've adapted, we've acculturated, so we have nothing to fear, or in any case, we are almost down and out anyway, so what could be worse other than death? That fatalism is not necessary at this point. What is necessary is personal responsibility. And so our people are enjoined to comply. I know it's tough, but we expect our people to comply. On the part of government, I think that government also has to think about palliatives. I've recommended that. We're going through very terrible times. Businesses are shut down. The people who will not survive if they don't go out to eke out an existence in 48 hours. We know that. And so government has to take responsibility. This is primary now. Every other thing should be secondary. And so I think that if government does its own part and the Nigerian people do their own part, I think that we will just be fine at the end of the day, hopefully.
The CJN's order suspending court sittings for 2 weeks in the first instance, and now the AGF has come out to issue a press statement saying that courts should sit on time-bound matters. Does the AGF has the power to give directives to the judiciary?
I read it. I think that the AGF just also wants to make a comment. You know, what the NJC and the CJN and the heads of the courts all over the country have done will suffice in the circumstances. The AGF, you know, is not in a position to dish out directives or, you know, render advisory in that regard. In any case, because you have the bar and the bench. The bench is protected by security agents. So it's possible, for example, in the circumstance for a judge to move from his own residence to the court because he has an orderly, right? How does a lawyer who have a case in court do that in Lagos, for instance, that is supposed to be locked down? So it's not just sufficient for you to give an advice without, you know, looking at the circumstances
that will play out,
and the compliance neighborhood, whether there's an enabling environment for that kind of advice to be heeded in the circumstances. And I think that what the NJC, the CJN, the heads of the courts, their directives, what they've done will suffice. And just to tell you that we are in an unusual time. The governor of Lagos State was the one, you know, Lagos State government, in order not to personalize it, who first stated that part of the workforce should not come to work. And it was statewide civil service, including workers in the judiciary from level 1 to level 12, right? On that occasion, those who are insisting that things must be done, you know, quoting law and all that, wouldn't that be an interference in the judiciary by the executive? That what right does a state governor have in the executive branch of government to order workers in the judiciary not to come to work? I'm just playing up all this for us to know that we can't just behave like the ostrich, bury our heads in the sand, and then think that we do not know what is going on in the country. These are very serious situations.
Finally, I want you to weigh in on this issue that is also being talked about in the legal community, the issue of practicing fees. The deadline was March 31st, which has since passed. But in view of the disruptive nature of this virus, some people are saying it should be extended. Some other people are saying it's a rule, you can't extend it. Where do you stand?
I was almost caught because I shut my office earlier than the lockdown, you know, because we had to take personal responsibility. And in the whole process, I forgot about the practice.
And it happened to a lot of people.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
So it was on the last day that a senior colleague, I think it was Mr. Femfala, that actually prodded me and, you know, alerted me. And I then started scampering to look for online resources to be able to pay. And I was able to pay. So for our colleagues who are yet to pay, I think that there should be an exemption. There should be a relaxation. Rules are made for men and not vice versa. We are not slaves to law. And this is about self-regulation. It's an association. You know, it's not about the timeline. The deadline for payment of fees is to encourage payment, not to exact punishment. And so, since we had this unusual situation, we're in an emergency, a public health emergency, I think that the NBA should be rational enough to realize that it has to be extended. And in any case, you know, I've asked this question. You know, the people who have to file processes, time-bound and all that, including notices of appeal, 3 months or 90 days and all that. So if you're not able to access your office, you are not able to go to court to file processes. So what's going to happen at the end of the day? These are things that we should think about, so that post the COVID era in Nigeria, hopefully, we can, in trying to get our roots back as a people and get our businesses and social life and political life, everything back, you know, then deal with and ensure that nobody is penalized, nobody is prejudiced by this kind of intervention that disrupted our lives.